Hello and welcome to the first video in the series where I will be comparing and ranking the 4 characters in Slay the Spire the board game. My goal for the series is to learn the strengths and weaknesses of each of the characters so that we can play them better and just have fun comparing them. In this first video, we will focus on examining each character's starting hands and abilities. I've got just a couple disclaimers before we get started. All characters in this game are totally viable, they're all fun, and this power ranking is also just for fun. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the method we're going to use to evaluate them. Like I said, this first video is focusing on the starting decks and the starting abilities. I'm going to be assigning each card a value based on its effects, and I'm going to kind of subtract the cost of playing the card. Since all of our remaining energy each round will be used on starter strikes and defends, I can, for this, just make the assumption that 1 energy is worth 1 block or 1 damage. Finally, I'm also going to be making the assumption that each combat is only 2 meaningful rounds. This is going to be important for abilities that only happen like once per combat, like Silence or Ironclads. So let's get started. We're going to start with Silent. Silence ability is at start of combat, draw 2 cards. This can be an incredibly powerful ability. However, for early in the game, because he also starts with 2 additional defends or strikes, this is largely cancelled out. So as such, I'm considering it has a value of 0. Fortunately, he's got 2 very strong starter cards. Survivor is 2 block for 1 cost instead of 1 block for 1 cost of your star defend, making it twice as good and a very good card. It does have a downside of discarding 1 card, but when he draws 7 cards his first turn and certainly can't play them all, and even when he only has 5 cards, even if one of them is Ascender's Bane, he still can't play them all. So this has minimal impact on the card in the early game. And then Neutralize is his real winner. This one costs 0 and does just as much as Survivor, dealing a damage as well as applying Weaken. A Weaken, of course, reduces a damage by 1, making it practically just as useful as a block. It's even more useful when an enemy is attacking the whole party. In that case, this could be worth up to 4. For now, I'm just going to be assuming 2 because none of the enemies in the first combat, which is what this analysis is going to be most useful for, have an area attack like that. So for his total, we've got his ability of 0, plus 1 for Survivor, 2 minus 1, and then plus 2 for Neutralize for a total of 3. It's a good baseline for us. Next up, we've got Ironclad. Ironclad has a really cool ability of healing 1 at the end of combat. This is worth about 1 defense per combat, but it's really a solid and versatile ability. Notably, he also has 1 more health than the other characters. Not quite sure how to evaluate that one. It's not quite significant enough to really make a big splash, but it gives him just a little bit more flexibility with how he spends his hit points, so it's worth noting. And then he also has Bash. His biggest downside, though, his biggest weakness, is that instead of having 2 unique starter cards like all other characters, he only gets 1, and instead he gets an extra strike, which is not very good. Additionally, Bash, while useful late game, when a vulnerable, it can be dealing 20 or even 40 damage. Early on, when most people are just playing starter strikes to deal damage, it's likely only be worth about 1. The only other character who can even do more than 2 damage without picking up a card is Watcher, who can deal 2 damage, maybe 3 with Eruption if the game goes long, or 2 with his Star Strikes. As such, I only have it evaluated as 3 down here, but you could conceivably deal more like 4 with this card if you're paired up with Watcher. So all in all, 1 for his ability, 1 for this card. That totals 2. Again, maybe 3. Next up, we have Watcher. Watcher's ability is to gain a miracle at the beginning of every combat. A miracle, of course, is worth 1 energy. This 1 energy can then be spent on a defend or a strike for 1 value. That's why I listed as 1. It can also be used to allow you to play Vigilance and Eruption in the same turn, which will often be useful. Now, Watcher's a weird one to evaluate because she has these stances. Her card, Vigilance, gives you 2 shield for a value of 2, but it costs 2. It puts you in Calm. Now, Calm's the thing is that when you leave Calm, you gain 2 energy. So that means entering Calm allows you to leave Calm, so that's kind of worth 2 energy there. So that means that Vigilance, if you're able to leave Calm afterwards, is worth a net of 2 value. Eruption, then, is its counterpart, also costs 2 and deals 2 damage, enters Wrath. Now, Wrath makes it so that your sword symbols deal 1 extra damage, which is really strong when you only have these 1 damage starter strikes. Doubles their effectiveness, but it does mean at the end of your turn, you take 1 damage. For this analysis, I chose to say that's worth 0. You'll be doing it, of course, because you need it to do it to gain the energy from Calm. And of course, the extra damage is well worth it. But for valuing it, I decided to just value it at 0, assuming that the extra damage roughly might cancel with the damage you have to now block by playing more blocks. So 1 from the extra miracle at the start, 2 from playing Vigilance and gaining its energy, for a total of 3. Something noteworthy, though, is that since I'm assuming that there's only 2 rounds of combat, there's a 1/4 chance about that you get Eruption before Vigilance, meaning you can't actually get the energy out of entering Calm. In this scenario, you might be set back quite a bit from what I have totaled here, so that's worth noting. Finally, we have Defect. Defect's ability is he starts with this Lightning Orb. Because Lightning Orbs deal 1 damage per turn, and I'm assuming 2 meaningful rounds of combat, that means this is worth about 2. Similarly, we've got Zap, which is worth 2, costs 1, and Dual Cast costs 1. Because it's converting a Lightning Orb to immediate damage, you're losing on the future damage, so 1 cast of that, I think, breaks even with losing the orb, but the second cast is pure profit. So that's another 2 damage for evoking an orb. So with 2 from starting with 1, 1 from here, 1 from here, that's a total of 4. This is the highest we have so far. So something to keep in mind. I'm just looking at the starter deck, but you never are, or very, very rarely should you be playing with just the starter deck. You always have the Blessing card, which should add at least 1 card to your deck, which is going to be better than a starter strike and a starter defend. Just pulling a random card out of your reward deck. This one here, right here, Silent just gets basically a second survivor. So suddenly he goes from a total of 3 to this is now worth another +1 to 4. Clearly, everyone's doing this. This is not a fully realistic comparison of how each of these characters will perform in the first combat. And then it's going to get just more different from there. So I think it's still a worthwhile exercise in just kind of seeing where everyone's starting. But I do think that in terms of their overall power level, this is not going to have the greatest impact. But you have to start somewhere. So either way, I'm making a ranked video. You have to rank them all. So let's move over here. And we've got, up at the top, we have Defect, who had all the free lightning damage. followed by Silent, who has 3, a consistent 3 with his really good Neutralize card. Now we have Watcher, who also had the +3, but remember there was the chance of Eruption before Vigilance. And finally, we have Ironclad, whose bash is a little bit more situational than some of the other ones. Alright, so that was video 1 of this video series. I hope you enjoyed, and like and subscribe or something like that. Bye.